Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Crimson by me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, Tiger Supervisor. Today we are doing chapter 14. Alex sprawled on the floor with a grunt, aftershock still making it vibrate. The fall of the bunk had been more surprise than pain. In a moment to straighten himself and push up. "Stay here," Alex said, and was out of the cabin before Alex had collected enough wit to reply. Pulled himself back onto his bed and lay down, still queasy from the cryosleep process. The ship used the blood replacement system, and it hadn't agreed with Alex's metabolism. It was only his second time in cryo, the first one being when he traveled from his home planet to Delron 4 on a passenger. His passage had been paid by Luminex and used the suspended animation. Alex hadn't so much woken up as blinked and noticed the clock had jumped 3 years. He realized the ringing was actually an alarm sounding, not in his head, a moment before the ship shook again. That explained why Alex had rushed out. That explained why Will had rushed out. Maybe something had exploded? This was an old ship after all. He hoped they wouldn't be stranded. There were a lot of stories floating around the network about ships going missing only to reappear centuries later, and gone. Shuddered. This time, when the ship shook, Alex had the presence of mind to hold on to the bed to avoid being sent to the floor again. The explosion had sounded much closer. What was going on? I would no longer use this. Because he's asking the question, so it's clear that he's wondering. He thought about querying the ship, but remember the mess that was. He wouldn't learn anything there. He'd have to ask someone. Forced himself to his feet, and his stomach only put up a hint of a fight. Either the queasiness was passing, or his mounting fear was pushing that. The door opened as he got close, and he hesitated. Will had said to stay here, and he knew better than Alex what to do in circumstances like this. He hit the control menu when closing the door, and was considering his option when he heard blaster fire. Someone firing at them? No, that had sounded from inside the ship. He pressed his ear to the door, and he could hear more blaster, indistinct voices. For a moment, he thought the fighting was moving away. He stayed like that until he couldn't hear anything. He opened the door, and the scent of burnt wires assaulted him. His eyes burned from the smoke filling the corridor. He coughed and pulled his shirt over his mouth and nose. What was there fighting in the ship? He needed to find someone to ask. Since he didn't know where anyone was, he decided the bridge was the best place to go. There was always someone there. Carefully made his way to the wall. He carefully made his way through the halls, staying away from the sound of fighting and doing his best not to notice the blood on the walls. Will would be pissed. He'd worked hard at cleaning all the grime off of them. They'd have to do it again. He got a smell of the body, or seeing it, burnt and cut, seated against the wall as if he'd tried to make himself comfortable. He expected to be repulsed by it, but found that except for the smell, his nightly nightmare had been filled with much worse sight than this. He chuckled, maybe getting himself used to Tristan's massacre had been good for something. He continued, heading not for the left, but the closest ladder, and climbed that to the top floor where the bridge was located. Only a few floors up, and he regretted the decision. Still forced himself to continue, panting heavily by the time he reached the level. It was quiet, but he was still careful as he made his way. The door to the bridge opened as he got close to it, and Alex stepped back as one of the three crew there, the only man, spun and pointed a gun at him. Alex raised his hand. What's going on? He remembered him as one of Will's friends, but didn't know his name. We're under attack, the woman in the center seat replied without looking up from her control. The man had recognized him too, because he put the gun away and motioned for Alex to enter. Why? He asked as the door closed behind him. The woman glanced over her shoulder. What are you doing here? I was fighting in my room, he answered. I wanted to know why. This was the only place I could think of to get answered. One of their shuttles made it through our defensive fire and boarded us. She looked forward. Like, everyone's busy pushing them back. Perry, we have incoming. See them. I'm doing the best I can, but there's only so much I can do without computer assist. Alex took a step toward Perry and found himself staggering as the gravity shifted. It settled back, and Alex managed to regain his footing. Gravity's going, another woman said. That can't be good. Have they made it to engineering? The woman in charge asked. Now that I can see. Alex waited a moment to see if the gravity would change again, then went to stand behind Perry. The screen showed a few targeting reticules, small ship zipping about, and small ship zipping about. He wanted to ask why he wasn't using the computer to help, but he was afraid of distracting him. He knew the computer was a mess, but there was no way it could be in such a bad shape that something as vital as defenses didn't work. Was there? He looked at the unoccupied board. He looked at the unoccupied boards and went to one, taking out his earpiece. There was only one way to find out. With the tap of a finger, the board came to life. Alex didn't know what he was looking at. It didn't matter. It had a screen and a keyboard. That was all. That and his earpiece were all he needed to work. He put it in his ear, and it took a moment to make contact. What made the earpiece precious wasn't that it allowed him to talk to computers and hear them. Any earpiece available on the market did that. Luminex had designed this one to negotiate the contact by itself, and its controlling AI was smart enough to break through all encryption as far as Alex knew. That's why he wanted to keep it, and why Alex tried to stop him. With it, there were no computer he couldn't. He reeled back and pulled the piece out of his ear at the screeching that exploded in it. It took him a moment to regain his own equilibrium. That had been despair deeper than he'd ever heard. Put it back, and the scream assaulted him. How could it be in so much pain? Closed his eyes and focused past them. Couldn't learn anything from them. He had to be able to hear the computer's voice. Talk to me, Alex said, and he waited. The computer should respond to his voice. Only the most ancient one didn't have a way to understand the spoken word. The question was, would its current mental state let it talk back? Alone. Came a drawn-out wail. You're not alone, Alex said. I'm here. A screen came to life, a jumble of code stared at them. He thought this nightmare had been scary. He'd been wrong. This was scary. Who could have done such a thing to this computer? No one's listened. It wailed, all alone. I'm listening. Please talk to me. He could see part of the problem at a glance. It was compartmentalization. He was talking to the central processor, but nothing else. If he ever got his hand on who had done this, he was going to break his neck. His first instinct was to remove all the barriers, but it couldn't be done quickly, and with the computer in its current state, there was no telling what it would do once it had control of the whole ship again. It could very well decide to commit suicide and blow itself up. Nothing but wailing. He sighed, pulled a chair and sat. This was going to take a while. He glanced at Perry and hoped he could hold on until he had worked something out. Okay, I can't tell if you aren't hearing me or just refusing to talk, so I'm going to have to play in your code until you give me some sort of sign. Please, talk to me. The wail that responded nearly split his skull. You're not giving me any choice. Alex didn't know what he was doing. He wasn't a system killer. He was a coercionist. He could get any system to do what he wanted, but this wasn't just a case of getting a computer to obey. He had already been the victim of a coercionist. That's who had put up the barriers. He knew he had to be gentle with it. It wasn't how his work was done. He had to hope subtlety would work in place of gentleness. He looked at the code streaming before him almost faster than he could read. That wasn't the computer's personality. No one ever coded personality. Programmers coded in function, and how the code of those interacted with what was. How the code in those interacted was what led the computer to gain a personality. What he needed to do was calm it down, but he couldn't talk it down. He also couldn't just put in code and force it to calm down. That would just make the situation worse. He had to subtly enter its code in such a way that its fear would diminish enough to regain some sanity. The ship shuddered. He glanced at Perry, who was sweating, looking all over his screen and entering commands like crazy. The look in his eyes was there. Alex didn't have the time to be subtle. He closed his eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. When he opened them, he was typing. He added code in the middle of other code, bluntly cutting some to pieces to accommodate what he needed there. He was giving himself months, if not years, of work to repair the damage he was causing. He needed to make sure they would survive so he could be better to fix it. He isolated the processes that were causing the problem, put more barriers of interaction that were making the system unstable. His work was ugly. He knew he'd hate himself. He was still alive when it was all done. Talk to me, he said again, like he had each time he put up another wall. This time, instead of a low wall, static incident. Help me. The system voices were weak. Yes, I'm here. Perry glanced in his direction. Back on his screen. I hurt. The pain wasn't in the voice, wasn't a wail. It still twisted Alex's heart. I know. I'm sorry. Alex looked through the code. Was there anything you could reattach that would make the pain go away? Can you think? How are your processes? The answer wasn't immediate. I think. I hurt. I'm alone. I know. I will fix you, I promise, but I can't do that right now. We're under attack. You're under attack. If you don't help me, we're going to die. Death? Yes, please help me. Alex wrote code in the buffer that would take down one of the walls. Death makes the pain end. The computer stated. He froze. That wasn't good. Please, you don't have to die. I can make the pain end. If you die, a lot of people will die too. Where had the system's survival instinct go? Looked at all the code he had walled off somewhere in there. How long did he have? How long had he been talking with it? He didn't know. He couldn't think about that right now. Focus on what was important, getting the computer to help them. He swallowed and decided on a gamble. I can bring some of the voices back. Yes! The yell almost deafened him. He changed the code he prepared, and it tore down the wall between it and the gunnery station. No! It hurts. What the fuck? Perry yelled. I've lost control of the weapons. What are you... Alex shut them out. It had only been him. It had to be only him and the computer. I know. They are causing the pain. The computer was such a bad idea. If you want the pain to go away, you need to get rid of them. I hurt. You have to make the pain go away yourself. I can't do that part for you. I hurt. Alex Alex was pulled out of the chair by the scream. He pulled the earpiece and was surprised not to see blood on it. Guys? Jerry said, something's going on. Alex forced himself to stand and move next to the man. The screen showed a dozen targeting ridicule where there only had been 4 before. Each was targeting one of the attacking ship. One of them exploded, then another, and another one. And one more. Alex put the earpiece back and endured the scream of rage from the computer. He was going to have to be quick if this was going to literally blow up in his face. In all their faces. They're running off, Harry yelled. Alex waited. If he had acted now, and this was a ruse, it would render them defenseless. It hurts! Alex had to hold on to the board to a board to avoid falling down. He forced himself back to the keyboard and didn't bother sitting as he typed as fast as he could. He brought up walls in rapid succession. He cut off the computer from the gunnery system before he could think of overloading them and end the pain that was still there. Then he added barriers, cutting the central processor code into ever smaller pieces, until all that was left was the core processes, slamming themselves against the walls. Its screams were barely audible from the lack of processing power he had left. I'm sorry, Alex said. I will fix this, I swear. When he was done, and he'd rendered the computer nothing more than a mindless machine, he allowed his legs to give out. He leaned against the wall and held his head, trying to not think about the monstrous thing he'd done, reminding himself that unlike the horrors Tristan had committed, he could undo the damage. He hoped he didn't want to be the monster too. Cheering made him look up. The women were embracing Perry, thanking him for saving their lives. The man replied half-heartedly. He looked at Alex. Eyes locked on his. A look of wonder and horror in his face. Alex looked away, trying not to let despair overtake him. He sensed movement around, but ignored it. He had to be able to bring it back. No, that wasn't sufficient. The only penance for the atrocity he committed was that he had to make it whole again. Anything less, he might as well be guilty of its murder a second time. Someone grabbed him by the shoulder and shook. Alex looked up into gray eyes. What the hell did you do to my computer? The woman asked. took a moment for Alex to understand what she'd said. When he did, he was up and pushing her against the wall, screaming in anger. What I did? What the fuck did you do to it? How could you cut it off from all the ship's system like that? You drove it insane. She pushed him away. I didn't do that, she glared at him. It was like that when I came on. I did the best I could to keep it functional, but it isn't responding anymore. Alex felt his leg wanting to give again. Couldn't let them. I didn't have a choice. I had to lock it down completely. I lied to it. I had no way to know what it might do to retaliate if I let it. You talked to the computer? She asked, disbelief in her tone. Of course, it's a thinking being. Alex looked at the blank screen. It was. Who are you? Someone asked, and Alex noticed there were a dozen people in the room watching. I'm Alex Crimson, he replied, trying to figure out who had asked first. I'm your Will's friend, Harry said. I shrugged. Okay, Crimson, the woman he held said, what did you do? What I had to do to help. His voice was weak. He couldn't keep the wail of pain from sounding in his head. The horror of hearing them faded as it took more and more of the computer away. I convinced the computer to take over the weapons. I told it that if it destroyed the attacking ship, the pain would go away. His voice failed him. Once it realized I lied, it could have used any of the system it controlled, like life support, to lash out. So I did what I had to keep us safe. What am I supposed to do now? She asked. Everything is in standby mode. The moment something goes wrong, like, oh, I don't know, smoke's in the hall, life support isn't going to be able to adjust to that. The seer, Harry said, if it wasn't for him, we'd be dead right now. Everyone looked at him. I'm not the one who scared them away. That was the computer. I was barely managing to keep up with the attacks. When it took over, their ships blew up. That's when they turned and ran. Everyone was quiet until a woman in the center seat spoke. Okay. Seer takes Crimson back to his quarter and let Will know about it. It won't do for him to be here when the captain gets back from dealing with the boarding party. After that, get with Wolowski and see what you can do about getting life support to deal with the smoke. Seer grabbed Alex, but he refused to move. I need to fix this, he pleaded. You're not doing it from here. Seer, when this mess is cleaned up, give him access to your lab. He can work from there. Seer led Alex out of the bridge. Can you really do it? Fix the computer? I have to. I can't leave it like that, not after what I did to it. I have to fix all that. Yeah. I have to fix all of the damage. She was silent for a moment. I don't know what you're going to be able to do much. I've been working on it for years now. The code's a mess and it doesn't want to cooperate. I know. Rub his face. It isn't my specialty. I'm going to have to figure out how to get advice, but I have to do it. I don't. Told himself. If I don't fix this, I'm better. It's true. Someone put a food tray down opposite Alex and sat. I hear we've got you to thank for being alive. Alex looked up from the data pad at Duck and shrugged. Hey now, you gotta take the compliments where you get them. They're going to be rare enough. Why are you here? He asked, noticing the nod people gave him as they walked by. He didn't acknowledge them, not now, or the previous times that happened over the last 2 days. Well, I wanted to see the hero of the day myself. Duck, he said, I'm not a hero. She was the one to shrug now. The way I heard it, way I hear it, if it wasn't for you, I'd be dead. That sounds like a hero to me. The computer had been in good shape. We wouldn't have been in that mess to start with. I have no doubt, but as Seer's been working on it for years. She said the only way to fix it was to pull the core and get a new system installed. I can fix it. Doing his best to sound convincing. Wasn't giving up. Wouldn't allow himself to give up. Is that what you're working on? She indicated the data pad. No, really. Ironically, the ship doesn't have much about computer healing in its data bank. I need to contact some of my coworkers for advice, but Captain won't let anyone place calls. Oh, that's lifted. It was just while we left the station. He does that to ensure we don't have any smartass on board who think they can make extra coins by letting people know where we're going. Oh. If you could call out, then his odds were better. Mary had training in healing, and she'd be able to at least point him toward good manuals, except she worked for Luminex. There was no way they'd allow him to call in, or if they did, they'd trace his location. You'd have to set up something relays to hide where he was calling from. Maybe make a pre-recorded message with a remote answering location. Then contact. Shit, he had to tell his grandparents. How long had he been cryo? Where were they on a trip themselves? They hadn't mentioned one the last time they talked to them, but they were known for taking them last minute. Alex, you there? Yeah. Sorry. If I can contact someone, I'd be better equipped to fix the computer. That's good, but that wasn't why I got your attention. And there's a few tables behind you, glaring holes in your back. Why? Because you stole his thunder. He was part of the team that started the boarding party, so he was bragging about how he's responsible for us being alive. Someone pointed out what you did. Oh, sure, he can take the credit. I don't care. Maybe not, but he does. Anders has been on top of this heap for almost as long as he's been here. Doesn't like the idea someone else kept us alive. He isn't big on sharing the acclaims. He can keep them. You smile at him. I don't think that it's going to be that easy. Just watch yourself. Avoid walking around alone. Oh, and come see me as soon as you have the time. Why? I'm fine. You're overweight. I'm putting you on a exercise and eating regimen. Anders is going to have a go at you. I want you able to take him on. I don't want to take him on. He isn't going to care. She picked up her empty tray and left it alone. More people nodded and smiled at him. He looked down at the data pad and cursed. What he wanted was passage to Somalia, not getting involved in the life of the ship. And this concludes chapter 14 of Crimson. If you are enjoying this, leave a like. Subscribe and hit the bell to know when the next one is going to be. If you want to support me, my Patreon is in the link. You can get access to a whole lot more stories from there. If you want to read the rest of the series, it's available on all major e-retail stores. And if you want to watch me do these live as well as write my books, you can do that on Twitch. All the links are in the notes. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.